Welcome to Papa's Workshop. In the previous video, I had started working on some new stools for my grandkids to be able to have for their also new table. Well, in that video, I had asked who wants to see these actually finished, and I had quite a few requests that said, please, we would love to see these stools finished for the grandkids. Well, in this video, that's what I'm doing. And I actually got the grandkids involved too. They were so excited, they wanted to color in the images that I had engraved in that previous video. So today, I'm going to show you how I built them and some easy techniques to make these angle cuts very simple to do. So let's get started. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of my Patreons. The support really does help this channel. And if you'd like to be able to participate, please go to patreon.com/papasworkshop. And I do thank every single one out there for watching these videos, because without you, there would be no reason to have this channel. So again, thank you very much. In the previous video, I used the Fox Alien 40-watt laser to be able to engrave the top of the stool. And this was the first one that I had done. Here's a quick look at the second one that I had completed. Now I'll put a link in the description below and also up top to this video where I did the engraving on these two characters. But for now, let's get started on making the stools. The top itself needs to have the round over, and I also need to eliminate the sharp edges. The easiest way to do that is with the large socket set to be able to establish the radius. And I can just choose the socket that I want and be able to make the radius to round off these corners. And in this case, I picked the one that I like, so I can just go ahead and mark all 4 of the corners, and then from there, I'll take it over to the bandsaw to be able to cut those edges off. And the last step with this process is just take it over to the oscillating sander and sand the edges down so they're nice and smooth. Then I will take it over to the router table and put that round over on it. Now the bit that I'm using is a 1/4 inch round over bit to be able to smooth that off. I don't want any sharp edges on these stools. Here's a quick look at how I did the edges and how I trimmed off those sharp corners. So the top itself now is done. I think this is going to be beautiful, and I think the kids are going to love it. I want to talk for just a moment about the legs for this stool. Now these taper in at approximately 7 degrees. Really doesn't matter exactly what you make it. I just choose about 7 degrees. If it's 6, 7, 8, doesn't really matter. The main thing is that it's consistent throughout the whole project. So I'm just going to use 7 degrees. So these taper in 7 degrees on each side. Also, this leg will taper this way 7 degrees. So there's a 7-degree cut across the top as well as the bottom. Now once you have the setup with the angle and you have that set on your miter gauge and your bevel square, that's it. One setup and you're done. You don't have to change anything else. Let me show you what I mean. To set the angle, I'm just using the speed square to be able to do that. And I can set it down on my piece of plywood, and then I have this scale right here to be able to do the degrees. This being the pivot point over here, and then I can turn, that would be 5, 6, 7. You can do any angle that you want. Now if you look at this up close, this is not the most precise measurement, but it's good enough to be able to do what you need to do when it comes to making a stool. So I can literally put this down, rotate this until it hits the 7 degrees, and draw my pencil line. I need to make that a little bit darker so that you can see this in the camera. So that's my 7-degree line. The next thing that I need to do is set up the bevel square to that same exact angle, because I'll need to be able to tip the saw blade that 7 degrees, and this is the perfect tool to do that with, to be able to cut this top edge and the bottom edge to the 7 degrees. And the other tool that I need to get set up is the miter gauge. this needs to be set exactly to the same angle. And if you look, this is set to the exact same angle. Once I have this done, I'm set. I can make this entire stool without making any additional adjustments. At the table saw, the first thing I did is I took my plywood board and I ripped it down to the height that I'm going to make the stools. Now this may vary depending on the height that you want your stools, but that's going to be the first step. Next, I used the miter gauge and I cut that first angle. From there, it's just a matter of being able to repeat that same process. Now each time I cut the angle, all I need to do is just flip my board. So I had made the first cut off camera, and then I flipped my board over and made my second cut. And you can see that gives me the two sides. Now flip it over, and I don't need to make another cut for it because that would waste plywood. Now you notice over on the fence, I have a little stop block. That ensures that each side of these legs are exactly the same. So all I need to do is just be able to run it through again, and this will give me leg number 2. And then I'll just repeat the process, flip this over, and I'll run the next leg the same exact way. So you just flip it over, slide it over to my stop on the fence, and at this point you can see I'm just about out of room. So all I need to be able to do is just make a little fence extension, and it's nothing fancy, it's just a straight piece of wood. Now I could clamp it in there and do all kind of fancy stuff, but it's really not necessary just for this one cut. So I can hold this in place and make my final cut. And that worked out really well without any difficulties whatsoever. Keep in mind though, if you're not comfortable doing this, just go ahead and take a clamp and clamp this piece of wood to your miter saw gauge, and that way it'll be secured in place. Now at this point, with that one setup, I was able to cut out all 4 of the legs, and they're all cut at the same exact angle. Now remember that bevel square that I told you about that was set? Well, I had to tilt the saw blade over to that 7 degrees with that bevel square, and that was the easiest way to do that. And then I just turned my dust cover back and I'm ready to cut it. Now there's nothing fancy about this at all. It just literally runs straight through the saw using the fence as my guide. Now you do make sure that this is oriented correctly, because if you don't, you'll do the opposite cut from what you need. So please be aware of that. Now on this second cut, because that dust guard is raised up higher, it was blowing some sawdust around. Just by putting this one little piece of wood right up against my dust collection, it worked fantastic. It was able to stop that air gap and capture all of that sawdust. And I just continued on running these pieces through, and it worked fantastic. So now I have on the top and the bottom of my legs that 7-degree angle cut. I need to be able to create some little feet, because you don't want the bottom of the stool with this straight edge. Now I measured over from the edge of the board 3 inches. And again, you can make this anything that you want. I just chose to do the 3 inches. I think it complemented the look of the stool. Now without changing this bevel square at all I need to do is just line it up with my 3-inch mark and draw my line. And that creates a parallel line to the outside edge. With the ruler, I just marked up 4 inches. And again, this is an arbitrary measurement. You can make this as short or as high as you want. But the idea is, with the bevel square, your angles are already set. So you just, again, put this up there, make your line. Now I do need to have a straight edge to extend that all the way over across to the other line. But that gives me my perfect little feet that I need to add in here without doing any extra measurements. The bevel square was all I need, and it was the original setup. Now this is the old paint can trick to be able to get the radius, to be able to get rid of, again, that sharp inside corner. Don't want that. So it's back to the bandsaw to cut this out. The oscillating sander will clean it up, and of course I'll do the round over on the router. Now I've made the 2 sides for my stool, and I have the top. What I need though is that cross beam that comes across this way to be able to support the two legs. And I'm going to do that exactly the same way. I need to measure down about 6 inches, and that's going to be plenty of room to be able to have that. And then with this 6 inches, I'm going to go ahead and cut this at the table saw. Then I'll go ahead and cut the two 7-degree angles. And the miter gauge is already set. So just like we did before, the first step is to go ahead and cut the two pieces that are the 6 inches long. That'll be one for each of the stools. Next, with the miter gauge in place, I'll go ahead and make that first cut for that 7-degree angle. And of course, I'm going to cut both of them at the same time. And that way, it keeps it consistent, especially for the second cut. And we're looking at the bottom of the top of the stool. And I went ahead and put a mark on each side. Now this is going to be the outer portion of my leg. And then I marked the inside piece. Now this is going to be the inside. So that's really the thickness of the leg of the stool. Now this is going to go from that inside edge over to the inside edge again. But first, what I want to do is test this fit. So if I take the leg and I put it right up here on that mark, that's where it sits, and it bevels out that 7 degrees. This piece, which I just cut now, will slide directly into it, and it fits perfectly. That's the beauty of having one setup to cut all the angles. Now while I have it here, I'm going to go ahead and mark where this one needs to cut. And that will cut that 7 degrees out that direction. So that's the measurement here from this point to this point. And it'll be out that 7 degrees from here out to out that 7. What is this measurement? Don't really care. It's going to be whatever it happens to be, because this width's already predetermined and it's cut. So the only thing that I really need to be concerned about is the measurement on this portion right here. So what I need to be able to cut is this angle right here. And when I set this on the table saw the first time, I cut it through. So what you have to do is just flip this over and then turn it around to be able to get the other angle cut. And because I've marked it back here, and this is the side that needs to go to the fence, I need a way to be able to know exactly where to enter this into the saw to be able to cut it to this point. Now the easiest way to establish that point is just put a little piece of masking tape on the saw and then slide a piece of wood or a straight edge of any type over right to the edge of that blade. And then you can mark with a pencil right here, and that's where it needs to be. Then when you take the wood and you put it against your miter fence, all you have to do is line this up to right there, set the fence gauge to that point, and we're ready to be able to cut. So you can see the measurement right there that's on the saw table, and you can see that mark directly above it. Now if you want to get even more accurate, I can draw a straight line to this point just to verify it. I went ahead and drew the pencil line right here that would be square to that point, and of course it matches the line that's on the table. So now I know when I cut this through the saw that this is going to be the right measurement. With this stop in place, I'm able to duplicate this part. Now I need 2 of them, one for each stool. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this one, and with everything set up, there's no measurement required, and I'll just be able to go ahead and cut the second one. With everything checked and double checked, there's nothing left to do except cut the 2 parts. So this is the first one, and with that taken care of, I can just slide it out of the way, drop in the second one, and I'm ready to cut it. Can't get any easier than that. Also, by the way, I am loving this dust guard and dust collection. it is really making a world of difference. I'm going to go ahead and turn this around just a little bit so that you can see it better. And when I put this piece up, that's going to line up exactly where it needs to be. Just like that. And then I'll take the second one and do the same thing. So with the test fit done, and I know that everything works, now I'm ready to go ahead and assemble the project. Before I actually glue it together though, I want to be able to take the router table and do that round over on the bottom portion of this brace. This is important. Again, I don't want any sharp edges that the grandkids can get hurt on. Now this may seem like a small thing, but to me this is very important, to be able to have all the edges nice and smooth. Now to be able to assemble it, yes, I'm going to be using glue. I'm going to glue everything together. This is going to be the top. I've already glued the two sides together with that center brace and nailed it into position. And now I want to do the same thing with the top. I have my guidelines on the top itself already drawn, so I know exactly where to set it. Now, even though I have those pencil lines there in place, I still want to be able to take the tri-square and make sure and check each of these four corners just to make sure that they're perfect. If there's any movement that needs to be done, well, now's the time to do it. The grandkids themselves are so excited to be able to get these new stools, and when I showed them the tops on the characters that I had put on them, they had immediately ran for the markers and said, we want to color them. So yes, they had the opportunity to get involved with making these stools, and they colored these with their own style, which I think was absolutely fantastic. I haven't decided how I'm going to do the final finish, but I will be able to say this. This artwork that they did, they'll be able to remember this for many, many years to come, that they were able to participate in making these stools and color these characters. I absolutely love it. So at this point, the stools themselves are finished. And yes, I do have to decide how I'm going to finish them, and that's going to be for another video. As far as filling the nail holes and the little voids in the plywood, just going to use the glue and sawdust. And that method has worked for me really, really well over the years. One final thought that I do want to mention. Yes, I could have made this whole entire stool on the CNC machine, but what fun would that have been? I wanted to test out the new saw guard and my dust collection on the table saw. So thank you for watching today, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in the next video, whatever that may be.